Okay, and here we see the New York Kouros, the great example of this influence of Egyptian art. From those small 2.5 feet works like the Lady of Auxerre, we see life-size statuary. Here, 6 feet tall, made of marble, that commonly found material in the Greek region. We see our first monumental human figure, bringing in what is known as the archaic period of Egyptian art. Clearly, if we compare this guy to a Egyptian work like Menkaure and Khamenei-Nebti, we see a range of similarities and differences, right? How are these similar and how are they different? Yeah, Carlos. Yes, they do. They have that the left foot forward, and in order to do this, they have to extend the left leg by a few inches, right? So it's a naturally rendering of the body. Yes, we see a longer face. This is the Daedalus face, right, in the work, but we see the same kind of frontality where we're looking at it from the front. Yeah, JW? That's right, and what a difference that makes, right? What is the effect of that, of having a sense of open space between his legs and arms? What's that? It gives a sense of kind of musculature in a way that is missing here. This conveys an authority, a monumentality, right, an everlasting quality to the work on the right, which is spoken about in terms of being a monumental, which we have this, does not have that same effect, right? The work on the left. These kind of cutaways here give more of a sense of naturalism, if you will. Yeah, Cole? Yeah. Absolutely. And a kouros, I might say, is an archaic Greek statue type depicting a male figure. Oftentimes, these were made as grave markers or as offerings to a god. Okay? We do see the Egyptians embracing that, the Greeks embracing that Egyptian interest in canon, or a rule, as in a rule of proportion. That grid formula that the Egyptians are going to use is going to be parlayed and also used by the Greeks, as we can see here in the desire and the continual use of a formulaic type. Sorry. What else is it? So we have nudity. This is reflective, of course, of the Greeks' interest in the human being. His humanity is emphasized rather than the power of the individual. This is a king on the right. The Greeks here, this is a young man. The Greeks preferred to show people like the Egyptians in their idealized state, which both cultures agree is a youthful state. As we're seeing, as we know, Menkaure probably looked nothing like this, right? Yeah. Yeah, they were actually. Yeah, with encaustic, that's right. A waxing pigment to give a sense of kind of naturalism painted on the face to make these appear to be more naturalistic. That's right. Anything else? Yeah, Leo. Yeah, they have the bilateral symmetry. What about the body, though? I mean, it is different here, right? We have evidence of more kind of understanding of anatomy. This is interesting. We get this kind of crest of muscle, right, at the pelvis in the Greek work. This kind of, and also this kind of flesh here around the kneecaps, giving a sense, really, of this figure having the potential to move, right? Obviously, anatomy is of interest, where what I'm trying to argue on the right, where we have these kind of an image more meant to convey power and a sense of eternity. One of the most extraordinary things about the Greek tradition here is how quickly they are going to move and transform. And here we have a work just 40 years later. This is known as the Calf Bearer. This is another one of these Kouros figures. This one has an inscription at the base indicating that it represents a man named Rhombos. And he here is carrying a calf on his shoulders, bearing gifts most likely as an offering to the goddess Athena. This was found at the Acropolis in Athens. The animal and the man are kind of bound together in this X shape across the torso of the body in this kind of formally interesting composition. This is a bearded figure. The use of a beard represents a mature mature men wore beards in the Greek world. We say a similar use, braided hair being used as well. And a key difference here between the New York Kouros on the left, Sam? Yeah, he's got a smile on his face. And this is the archaic smile. It is not meant to indicate that he's happy, but rather as a desire to animate, to bring a sense of lifelikeness to this living sensibility. And we see this from an early point, this desire for an animate sculpture. And this is going to lead the Greeks, of course, to further and further study of the human body, to heading down the road towards naturalistic renderings through a study of anatomy. Also, another interesting aspect of this work is he's cloaked. He does have a diaphanous cloak on. You can see it here. Most likely nude. His aspects of his body are evident, but he is wearing this cloak. Yet another generation later, 10 years later, we have the Anavosos Kouros from, I'm sorry, this is always confusing, Kriossos, which is a Kouros figure found in Anavosos, Greece, dating to 530 BCE. Here we see the continuation of the Kouros tradition, another grave marker. We know about Kriossos from the inscription of the work. This was a man who died in battle as a hero. There's an inscription saying, "Stay and mourn at the tomb of the dead Kriossos, whom raging Ares destroyed one day as he fought in the foremost ranks." What's happened here in just 70 years? Yeah, Matt. How so? Where? Right, we see a further study of anatomical form, right? Particularly through the abdominal region of the body. We see it here. Also really notable, right? That same kind of crest of muscle through the pelvis. Now it's rounded in form rather than kind of stylized like we see in the New York Kouros on the left. We've lost the Daedalic face, right? It's no longer long and triangular. We have a fleshiness, more of a roundness to the face, fuller cheeks. He's got the archaic smile, right? We can identify this as an archaic work. Anything else? Yeah, Ashley. Yeah, it's kind of a different one. That one was found at Athens, at the Acropolis. So that was like more like a guy. Yeah, they would have had inset stone in the eye, and all of these were painted through the face as a sense. Yeah. The Persians are going to sack the Acropolis, and they're going to find all sorts of sculpture ruined there. It's going to be a great source of gathering archaic sculpture. And the female figures as well, they believe they found it actually Athena there, that they're more about the kind of goddess and the offer bear votive type of figures than these kourai, which are very, very rare and special, and highly prized. You can see here that parts of it have been lost, right? All of the works we've been looking at obviously are ancient and are various states and conditions, and it's just a determination by the conservation staff that they're going to continue, to kind of put in parts that are missing. And usually now it's the practice to make it obvious where there has been conservation and reconstruction has taken place, as you can see here. Okay, so we have this clear movement towards naturalism in these works, and this desire to be ever more lifelike in these renderings. And as I said, as many have already noted, these were amplified through encaustic painting, basically where pigment was mixed with wax and applied to the surface of these works while it was still warm. We have evidence of these kouros figures. There's also a tradition of female figures as well. And here I am showing you the kourei, which is the female component of these figures. This is a contemporary of the Anavosos kouros. We see a woman wearing the peplos, which was a long woolen belted garment that was pinned at the shoulders, that was fashionable at this time. Fortunately for this figure, the garment is going to go out of style relatively soon, and a more flattering look will be brought in. But here we can see the clear similarities with the Lady of Auxerre and the earlier tradition with the columnar waist. Here there's a sense of frontality. She does deviate from the tradition that her arm is going to traject outward into the space of the viewer. This is an innovation of this early period of the archaic. She's got the smile. We see evidence of the encaustic on her robes. This is believed to have actually been a representation of the goddess Athena that would have been there at the Acropolis at Athens, the sanctuary there, before it was sacked by the Persians in 480. Here is another kourei figure found there. This is done 10 years later. Here we can see the peplos is out of style, and here we have the more flowy drapery of this new age. This woman wears the chic chiton and himation. The chiton was kind of an undergarment, and the himation a heavier cloak or mantle that was then draped over the body, offering this kind of swaying of drapery, which we're going to see is going to be something that classical age sculptors like Phidias are going to master. Female figurines wore clothing as was appropriate. And we will recall that there was a very different lifestyle for women in the ancient Greek world. They were not included in public life whatsoever. And there were different rules of propriety for them. We see kind of a sense of the kind of flowingness of the garment, also the kind of hair is arranged ever more naturally. We still see evidence of that archaic smile here as this attempt to render a sense of lifelikeness. I want to look briefly at the tradition of painting in the ancient Greek world during the archaic period. Really, it's going to be these ceramic works that give us our best idea of the status of painting. In the Greek world, this is what has survived and available for us to analyze. This is the work of an extraordinary master named Exekius, who is going to kind of really make huge leaps during the Archaic Age. If you'll remember the Diplon crater, right, and the geometric patterning, the all-over nature of it, In Ezekias's work of Achilles and Ajax, he basically presents only one singular scene, reduces the action of the story of the Iliad into this extraordinary board game between Achilles and Ajax. These two warriors who here meet in full armor and these extraordinary mantles that have been incised in the black figure technique. We can see here that Achilles is larger and he is rendered in hierarchy of scale. His helmet perched on top of his head makes him larger than his opponent Ajax. The two huddle over a board game or playing dice. We can see that these little dots in front of the mouth of Achilles, he calls out his numbers versus the smaller numbers of Ajax, here announcing that he is winning with a higher number on the board, basically encapsulating the whole battle or the whole raging conflict of the Trojan War has been reduced down to this kind of essential moment of these two figures playing this dice game. Extraordinary in its skill level. We do see that both these figures, while we have an obvious advancement of naturalism seen from the side, we still see evidence of the frontal eye, which is kind of a hallmark of the early archaic period. But that we have had this kind of reduction of a complicated story into one essential frame is the kind of path in which Greek painting will move, and is the extraordinary development by Ezekias. I now want to look at the architecture, the development of architecture in the archaic period, and I'm going to show you here the temple of Hera, Hera at Paestum, also known as the Basilica temple. With the contact with Egypt, we are going to see very quickly the ancient Greeks are going to embrace a much larger stone-based architectural vocabulary, best exemplified in this temple that dates to about 1550 BCE. And it's during this archaic period that we're going to see the rise of the Greek temple. This is called a peripteral temple because it has a single row of columns on all sides. It is believed that the basic temple plan or layout derived from the megaron, that rectangular room that we see, for example, in Tiern, which was the receiving hall of the king, that this becomes amplified during this classical period. The actual Greek religious practices took place outside in the open air. And these temples were places for making offerings. We need to learn a little bit of vocabulary here in order to discuss Greek temples. And here is a plan of this particular temple. As you can see, this row of columns around the outside is called a peristyle, and those little dots there indicate each column. Okay, the Greeks are going to be very much oriented towards proportion and symmetry, and in this early archaic temple, which is quite massive in scale, they are going to abide by a 2-to-1 formula, where we're going to have 9 columns along the top and double that along the side for 18 columns down the side. And this sense of proportion and balance is central to their understanding of architecture. And interesting, I think it's helpful to think of their approach to architecture as really being much more kind of sculptural in orientation, the way we think of sculpture today. They're very based on the way in which one sees these sculptures. They're usually seen up high and are designed to be read in the round from all sides so that they're symmetrical on all sides. This is in a state of ruin. In the ancient world, it would have had a roof on it, and in the center, there would have been a walled room, which is called a cella, okay? And here we see the cella in the plan. In the archaic temples, they had, according to be in accordance with this kind of understanding of symmetry, they had a row of columns, supporting columns in the middle of the cella. Ultimately, they are going to get rid of that central row because they're going to place large statues of the deities in the center of these rooms, and they want it to be in accordance with symmetry, to be in the center of the room. So they're going to kind of play with this. You can also see in the cella here, there is a kind of a porch, a front porch, the pronaos, and if there's anything in the front, then they have to have it in the back. It's all about a sense of kind of proportion and balance. The exterior of the temple are going to emerge, two different kind of orders or styles really are going to emerge during this period in the 6th century. It's called the Doric order and the Ionic order. The Doric order is going to emerge in the mainland of Greece, and the Ionic is going to emerge on the Turkish coast, which was part of the city-states of Greece during this period. Okay, and so you can see one of the key, most obvious differences between these two different styles is the capital, which is this section of the temple. The column consists of the shaft and then the capital up above. And you can see here in this Doric temple, the capital consists of an echinus, this section here, which I want you to look at, and then above an abacus, which is a small topping. Of course, on the Ionic temple, most notably, you see the fancy curlicues, are called volutes, okay, on either side, okay? And these are a more elegant form. And I want you, as you walk out of campus, out of our class today, to be on high alert for the day for Doric and Ionic columns, okay? And then there's a third order, which is going to be favored by the Romans, which is called Corinthian, and that's going to be a fancier one, yet even more fancy, that's going to have acanthus plants spraying out at the top, okay? These were, the Doric was associated, as I say, with the mainland, and then the Ionic with the Ionic coast. But we're going to see evidence of both being used throughout. Another aspect of these that we need to know is the entablature. And the entablature is basically the section above the columns. This is what the heavy top portion of the temple, which is supported by the columns underneath. And of course, this is the ultimate example of post and lintel architecture, right? Where we have a series of columns supporting a large entablature on the top. In our quest for vocabulary, the temple fronts, east and west, are marked by a pediment, a triangular shape, which we see here above the frieze section of the temple. One of the key differences between Ionic and Doric is the Doric had a series of triglyphs and metopes, which it was divided. And so this is so important to us because this is where we're going to find the artwork. Sculpture is going to be placed in these areas. The metopes were individual little squares of relief sculpture for the most part. And then in the Ionic temples, large friezes of continuous reliefs are going to appear. Both we're going to focus mostly, though, on the pediment, which is that triangular form on either side, east side and west side of a temple. Like the ziggurats and the pyramids, the temples are going to be oriented on cardinal points. Okay, it's going to be a continuation. And interestingly, the religious practices and ceremonies take place on the outside, and then gifts or offerings are taken and placed inside of the temple. I want to tell you, one of the notable things about Temple of Hera is just how kind of how much girth this baby has, basically. This is a large temple with very thick columns, and the actual swelling of the columns has a name, instasis, where we see the columns kind of swell and bulge. Unlike the Egyptians that produced works on a colossal scale, like at Karnak in the hypostyle hall here, we're going to see the Greeks are more interested on a human scale, and architects are going to think of the columns in terms of providing a human scale to the buildings. And we're going to watch a video today on the Parthenon, the great classical temple of Athena at Athens, where they're going to talk about the actual human bodily proportions as being inscribed and used into the temple themselves. So even their architecture is reflective of their humanistic worldview. Something that is way out of scale with the human body is not interesting to the ancient Greeks. Another aspect I want you to understand here is the stylobate. This is the actual floor of the temple, which is the base upon which the columns rise, and the floor of the temple. Temple of Hera, these are very large, almost like cigar-like columns, and the echinus itself is extremely flat, almost flat as a pancake, almost as if it's being squished down by the huge entablature above it. What we're going to see in the development of the architecture is an interest on ever more elegant temple forms, and we're going to see kind of a shift occur away from this very squatty type of column to one that is more tapered and elegant. Here is, because all of these temples are in different state of conservation and repair and so forth, we kind of skip around to look at different aspects of different temples. Here I want to kind of show you an archaic pediment from this period, and to do so, we're going to go to the Temple of Artemis at Corfu. This dates to about the same time as the Temple of Hera. Here we see the sculpture. This is the plan of what it would have looked like, the original plan, and this is what remains today. The temple pediment is kind of a tricky shape, and we're going to see kind of an evolution in dealing with the constraints of a triangular format. At Corfu here, we see in the center of the work the Gorgon Medusa, who here most of us are familiar with her snake-haired ability to turn a man to stone. She is seen in this kind of squatting form with one leg above the other. This is meant to convey a sense of motion or movement in the archaic vocabulary, or as if she's moving through space. Interesting, on either side of her, she is flanked by lions. In the old formula of kind of guardians at the gate, we see that at play in this early pediment. And then on either side of Medusa, with her bulging eyes and scary hair, also obviously a guardian figure, are her children, Chrysaor, a giant, and Pegasus. All that is visible of Pegasus is the rump of his flanks here. and then on either side. And you can see the disparity of scale, the giant size of the center, like almost hierarchy of scale with the very tiny children. And then we see scenes from the Gigantomachy on either side. The Gigantomachy is the epic battle between the giants and the gods for dominion over the world. The giants being associated with chaos and the gods with rationality, and thank goodness the giants win the war. I also want to show you an example of these of a frieze that we see in the Ionic vocabulary. This is also a scene of the Gigantomachy, and this is from the Sniphnian treasury at Delphi. This was an extraordinary building built about the same time. Delphi was like Karnak, it was a site that was built over time where the different city-states contributed different buildings. This is one of the most extraordinary additions to, it was a great place of where an oracle lived, and it was very, very important in ancient Greek world. The city-state of Sniphnia donated this treasury, a place where obviously treasure was kept, offerings to the gods. It was very influential. It's Ionian in its conception because it has this frieze on either side. And it was really remarkable because it had these two female figures in the front in the form of a column, and these are called caryatids. And these are going to be quite extraordinary and used in the Erechtheion on the Acropolis in Athens. To draw your attention to the frieze, which ran continuously around the outside of this little temple, we see a relief sculpture of the giants and the gods engaged in warfare. And we can see here a lion biting the body of a god as he goes down. He is nude. This was the practice for the ancient Greeks to engage in warfare in the nude as well as Olympic endeavors. This is going to be a very widely copied frieze and be very influential in later temple architecture. A bit later, around 500, during the Archaic period, we see in the Temple of Aphaea some changes have occurred already. What do you see happening here 50 years later? Yeah, Leo. Yeah, they never build anything quite this big again. They reduce the size in the columns, and they are constantly in play with these proportions through the Archaic and into the Classical period. What else? Less columns, so now we see 6 columns instead of 9. Matt? Yeah, they're more widely spaced, that's right. They become better engineers, basically, so they're able to space them more widely. Yeah, Elise? That's right. More of a taper upward, so we get the different kinds of instasis going on here. There's always swelling in a Greek column, and it's likened to kind of like the musculature of an arm or a leg. This kind of slight bulge that is indicative of the structural component or the weight-bearing component of these columns. Also, if you note here, the echinus has been greatly increased, so we get more of a transitional zone between the top of the shaft and the entablature. So it's kind of subtle differences, but this is all important and very much a focus for these ancient architects. Also, we're going to see, and here is a plan of the Temple of Ephesus, so you get a kind of more of a sense of what it would have looked like in the ancient world. They're also going to move away from that central row of columns in the cella, and they're going to move a column on either side. Interestingly, what they come up with is a plan. They have a cella wall here, but they're going to come up with a double colonnade, which is going to be run the side on either side of the cella, so they can place their large sculpture in deity of the deity in the center. Also, you get a sense here of the walls were brick, and the actual ceilings of these were terracotta. Okay, they were also painted brightly. The pedimentary sculpture were painted blue and reds, which were had great impact against the whiteness of the marble. Also, the Temple of Ephesus is an interesting site for art historians because we have two different pedimentary programs that were done about the same time, but kind of indicate that a shift occurs in this period. One on the east, as we see here, an example of the east. This is the sculptural group that remains. This is what it would have looked like in antiquity. Oh no, sorry, this is wrong. This is the west side. This is the east side. Both depict the battle of the Trojan War. We see Athena here in the center. But importantly, there's two critical differences. We have two examples of a dying warrior. A figure here who's dying in battle, and a figure here who's dying in battle. And you can also note how much more sophisticated they become in dealing with that difficult triangular format and these kind of more integrated compositional arrangements where we don't have that giant discrepancy in scale. We have, instead of having, hierarchical deity in the center and then tiny little figurines on the sides, we have different human beings in different state of, different lower positions. So in the far corners, we have these dying figures. And these are always remarked upon because of the shift that they indicate is occurring at this time. Here is the dying warrior from the east. Here is the dying warrior for the west. And this marks the kind of shift towards what will become the classical age of Greek architecture. And what happens here, Matt? Well, you tell me why they're smiling. Yeah, but they're still alive, right? This is the archaic smile. But one looks happier than the other in my Matt. What do you think? Which one? Yeah, the top one does look happier, right? Yeah, Leo. This is the east, and this is the west. What is happening? No, that's just there. That he's not really stabbing himself, right? That's holding this broken arm in place. No, he's not stabbing himself. This is not suicide. What's going on? Phil, what's happening? They're both dying soldiers. Is one of these more believable to you as a dying soldier? Yeah, why? Right, he's collapsing. His attention is away from the viewer, right? This is basically the shift from the archaic to the classical. The archaic, we have a figure that's posed to give as much information as possible to the viewer. And in the classical, the shift towards the classical, we see now an interest in the kind of interior mind of the individual, where we're less unaware of the viewer, and now we see kind of a psychological importance of the figures themselves taking precedent over display. Okay, and we see this guy who's kind of propped up awkwardly to give us as much information in this awkward gesture here, a shift downward. The body becomes more naturalistic, and this is going to be something we're going to look at further next time, tomorrow, when we talk about the trajectory of sculpture in the Greek world. Now, I want to talk about classical architecture, and it looks like we're not going to have time for our video, unfortunately. The advent of the great classical age in Greece, known as the period or the Golden Age, is going to be the period which is going to begin after the defeat of the Athenians by the Persians in 480 BCE. This Golden Age, or also known as the Age of Pericles, will basically last from about 500 to 429 BCE. Basically around 500, the Persians, as we know, were the largest empire of the Western world, begin attacking Greece, and the Ionian cities are going to fall to Persian advance. Athens is going to come to their defense and is going to begin to help them unsuccessfully revolt from Persia. This is going to provoke the Persian king Darius to invade mainland Greece in 490. Okay, he's going to build a giant causeway across the Aegean Sea from what is modern-day Turkey into Greece, and he's going to march his soldiers across in this extraordinary battle. Yes? Like a bridge, basically. Yes, yes. This is how rich and powerful the Persians are. The Athenians defend and defeat them at the epic Battle of Marathon, where they stand the hoplite army, and if you're into military history, it's very fascinating. They beat the Persians. The Persians are going to leave. They're going to, and you might recognize the word marathon. The Persians are going to, after they're defeated at the battle site at Marathon, they're going to try and go around the corner to Athens, and the Athenian army is going to have to run over 27 miles, but they run and to defend Athens, and then the Persian says, forget it. Thus we get their name Marathon today. 10 years later, the Persians regroup and they come again into Athens. At this point, Athens has built a very strong navy. Their plan is they abandon the city of Athens and they're going to hole up at the island of Salamis and then engage them in a naval battle, which they win. However, they left Athens undefended, so the Persians are going to come in and they're going to sack the Acropolis, the kind of temple area of the city, and they're going to sack it. The whole thing is going to basically radicalize the city-states and create a sense of kind of a congenious populace in a way that hadn't existed up until that point. The city-states are going to pool their money together and form a treasury, which is going to be called the Delian League. And they are going after the island of Delos, where it's going to be held. And this money is going to be used for any further attacks by the Persians. The Athenians, however, are going to be the ones that are basically going to be policing the Aegean with their very powerful navy. And so they are going to argue that the Delian League treasury should be moved to the city of polis of Athens, that they deserve it. So indeed, it's going to be moved around 450 BCE. And at that point, the great Athenian statesman Pericles is going to take that money and use it not for military and defense purposes, but rather for a fabulous rebuilding architectural and arts programs for the city of Athens. A man after my own heart. and thus going to make a lot of enemies. A lot of people are going to be angry that he's going to do it, but it's going to basically bring in the golden age of Athens. The wealthy of the region are going to flock into the city. This is going to create a wealthy leisure class that are going to be the patrons of the arts, along with the state funding of the Delian League treasury. We're going to see Athens become the center of Greek literature, philosophy, and the arts. This is going to be the age in this 100 years where we're going to have the likes of Aeschylus, Aristophanes, Euripides, the playwrights, Sophocles writing, philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates are going to be there writing and thinking and orating. The historian Herodotus will be in Athens at this time, as well as the sculptor Phidias. Okay? And the city is going to become, in Pericles' words, the school of Hellas. It's going to be this golden moment of great prosperity and political stability in which the Greeks are going to believe that rational human beings could and should impose order on their environment. And they are going to create perfect statues according to correct mathematical formulas, which they are going to believe are going to create perfect human beings and perfect buildings. Okay, the highlight of the rebuilding program is going to be the rebuilding of the Acropolis. And it's going to be during this stage that the city of Athens will become a democracy. The city itself is about the size of Pasadena, California. They are going to engage in this enormous rebuilding program. All of this as a statement to their strength and their ability to overcome and defeat the Persians, which is essential part of this, kind of like the rebuilding of the World Trade Center in our own time. This desire to build it, of course, bigger and better than it ever was before as an assertion of power and strength. Here is a Roman copy of a bronze original work of Pericles, typical of Greek portraiture. We see no individual features, but rather an idealized version of Pericles, who was kind of notoriously malshapen, with a very long forehead, which has been shielded here by the helmet of his strategos, his position as first citizen of Athens. The original, of course, would have been a full-body portrait. I'm also showing you an aerial view of the Acropolis and the Parthenon, the great temple to Athena Parthenos, which means virgin. This is the virgin embodiment of Athena. When you enter into the Acropolis, one gets a stunning view of the Parthenon. And the Acropolis basically just means city on the hill, and most of the city-states had an Acropolis of their own. Here we see a great example of the classical Greek sculpture. It was designed by Iktinos and Kallikratis in idealized portions in a Doric form. It is believed that they achieved the perfect, harmonious mathematical ratio to produce symmetria in their mathematical formula of x equals 2y plus 1. Basically, this breaks down to mean that they have 8 columns along the front, 17 along the sides. And this formula is used throughout the temple. The columns, as you can see, are now slender, no longer squat, mathematically precise. And perhaps one of the most extraordinary aspects of this work is that the architects took into account our own human perception of line. they realized that the human eye sees one long horizontal as being slightly curved, and so they corrected this by slightly curving the stylobate or the floor to have a slight curve to it. So this would correct the long horizontals of the temple against the sky, and it would appear to the human being to be straight, although indeed it was not. Also, they are going to make slight irregularities in the columns on the corners to make them actually slant ever so slightly towards each other, which make them appear to be straight to the human eye. In this way, they make these kind of account for our human perception to make this appear to be more beautiful. This means that they have to kind of hand render each aspect of the temple and make these accommodations in the various drums of the columns and so forth in this kind of extraordinary effort in a building that is basically constructed in about 10 years' time. Quite an amazing undertaking. This aspect of the temple has led some architectural historians to believe this desire to kind of imbue a sense of lifelikeness into this, or the kind of a living quality to the Parthenon that is kind of part of this kind of humanistic worldview that we know to be so central to the Greeks during this period. If you compare it here to the Temple of Hera, you can see how much more elegant it is with the slimmer proportions. Many lessons have been learned since the Archaic period. If we look inside, this is a model after the lost sculpture, which was 38 feet tall, enormous, one of the largest of these temple deities. This is Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin. She was made of, faced in ivory and in gold, making her chrysoelephantine, this combination of ivory and gold materials. Her skin was made of ivory, her cloak of gold, extraordinary in size. The cella of the Parthenon was made wider than usual to accommodate this huge statue. She has in her hand the goddess of victory, the Nike goddess, or the Nike, who was the winged female impersonation of victory. And of course, Nike has borrowed the swish is meant to be the wing of this goddess. She has her huge shield in her other hand. She is extraordinary in scale. She has on her aegis, her breastplate, a face of Medusa, repelling all evil. She was breathtaking in the time, and in fact, Pericles himself, or I'm sorry, Phidias himself was accused of embezzling the gold, portions of the gold of this cloak for his own personal use, and she was basically disassembled and gold taken off almost immediately. She didn't last very long because they needed they needed the money. Athens is going to suffer defeats by the Spartans, and also a plague is going to rip through. But anyways, it's just this kind of golden moment, which speaks also to the extraordinary wealth of Athens because of this Delian League treasury. Perhaps one of the most famous aspects of the Parthenon are the East Pediment statuary group, which took as its subject the birth of Athena. This entire sculptural group was the work of Phidias, who was the great classical sculptor of Athens, who worked very closely with the architects to design the friezes. He's going to design the metopes on the exterior. And one of the interesting aspects of the Parthenon is that it had an Ionic frieze on the interior of the exterior of the cella wall. And in combining both Ionic and Doric elements, they proclaimed their dominance over both regions of Greece. Here in the East Pediment sculptural group, here is the plan, the kind of strange moment in which Athena was born. She broke from the head of Zeus at dawn. We see here what remains of these of the group on the left. This is a sculptural group that took into account the aspect of time. Interestingly, because Athena was born at dawn, Phidias's plan acknowledges the rising of the dawn, and he does this by displaying Helios, the goddess of the sky, who brings with him the rising sun, his chariot as he emerges from the kind of base which becomes the ground line of the horizon. As his chariot moves upward, bringing the sun with it, this figure here, turning his back on the birth of Athena, is Dionysus, the goddess of partying and wine, who is ignoring the important action in order to toast the dawn. It is believed that he had a glass in his hand as Helios and chariot move upward. We see how extraordinarily advanced this sculptural group is, and this kind of understanding of the pedimentary composition compared to the archaic period. Yeah, question?
Would the average Greek citizen have understood all of this?
They were. Well, this was a very well-educated group of people. And yeah, these were their gods. This was their pantheon. This was known stories. Yeah, this was a well-known territory, absolutely, especially the life of Athena, who was the patron of Athens. Interesting about these marbles, they are actually located in England today. This is kind of the issue of these ancient sculpture and provenance. Basically, thanks to Lord Elgin, who was the English ambassador to Turkey in the 19th century, he found that people were just plucking marbles off of the Parthenon, and he decided that he was going to save the Parthenon by removing the marbles and then taking them back to England, where they are on display at the British Museum. Currently, there's a lot of negotiation going on between Greece and England, as where are many of the objects we've seen live in great European cities, like the Lamasseau live in Paris, and this is a big issue that has kind of rocked many museums, including our own Getty, who had to give back one of their kind of greatest works from Greek world. Yeah.
So the chunks are missing from the statue because people were taking it little by little.
Yeah. The Parthenon has had a kind of checkered history. I mean, it was ravaged almost immediately by the Spartans, and then it's actually served as a weapons depot in various states. It's had a difficult history, and it actually has undergone a massive reconstruction rather recently. And the video that I always show kind of goes through that, but we're not going to have time to do it. I think I am out of time, so we'll kind of finish off, and maybe we'll have some time to watch it tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, I could put the video online. Okay. See you tomorrow.